Okay, good day, class. So on our chapter 7, so this is the first part because we have a second part which is study of immunology or study of our immune system. So in this first part of our chapter 7, we'll be discussing about virology or the study about viruses. So the introduction sa aton virology. So what is a virus? Viruses are a unique are very uniquely different from many unicellular microorganisms you have studied so far. Your protozoan, mga yeast, and also bacteria sa mga mycoplasma or mga Rickettsia and your chlamydia are all living organisms with the following features in common. They are all cell and they store their genetic information in as your DNA. Within their cell, they contain your organelles necessary for producing energy and synthesizing your proteins called carbohydrates and cell wall constructions and so on or so forth and etc. And you replicate by the means of binary fission. Now, sa aton nga viruses, they do not share these properties. They are not cells. They are simply structures consisting essentially of nucleic acid genomes protected itself with a protein. They are metabolically inert and can only replicate once they are inside a host cell. The genome consists of only one type of your uh, ito. Genome is consists of one type of nucleic acid. It is either RNA or DNA. So most DNA nga viruses are double-stranded and most RNA viruses are single-stranded or SS genome. Your ssRNA or single-stranded RNA genome may be either positive sense. This means that it can be used on mRNA or messenger RNA to make proteins or negative sense whereas yung negative sense mga RNA is complementary to your messenger RNA. In other words, it has to be copied into a mRNA and the viral genome codes only for a few proteins necessary to replicate. Some proteins are non-structural. You have your polymerase and some other are structural. You have in they form part of your virion structures and they have no organelles. They are very small size that ranges from 20 to 200 nanometer with newly discovered viruses as large as 800 nanometer. Most viruses are beyond the resolving power of our light microscope. So, ibig sabihin, hindi ka gid nakakita sang virus sa aton nga normal microscope. Now, how do viruses cause a disease? Your viruses are capable of infecting all types of living organisms from bacteria to human, including your plants and insects. Many major factor that controls which cell type of a virus can infect your cell tropism, uh, is the presence on the cell wall surface or appropriate receptor to which the virus must attach in order to gain entry into the cell. Your viruses enter the body by inhalation, okay, by uh, aerosol. Then you have your ingestion, matulon, you have sexual intercourse, and incubation through the skin or mucous membranes. Your infection may also sometimes be passed from mother to fetus, which is a transplacental, through your vertical membranes, vertical transmission. And once a virus has gained entry into your body, the infection may either remain localized to the site of your entry, for example, your influenza, wherein the virus remains confined in your respiratory tract, or it may cause disseminated or transfer siya sa imong lawas or ma-spread. Here are the virus replicate initially at the site of your entry, but then enters your blood or your viremia or lymphatics and spread through the body. For example, you have your measles. Other viruses such as rabies and herpes simplex may replicate locally initially, then enter your nerve ending and travel to the axon to affect your CNS or your central nervous system. Okay, the term incubation period defines the time from the exposure to an organism sa onset of your diseases now or mga symptoms. In both general viruses can cause localized infections, have short incubation period, whereas it is less than 7 days, while the dissemination or pag spread ng virus infections, the incubation period tends to be longer. Both viral and the host factor contribute to the clinical diseases during the course of your viral infection. Host immunity cells release interferons and other cytokines which induce the symptoms of a fever or a malaria. Tissue-specific damages may be due to virus-inducing lysis of your infective cells due to inflammation and destruction of your infected cell by the host immune system. We will be discussing ang mga immune system sa part 2. Because viruses replicates intracellularly, recovery from your viral infection requires the action of a specific cytotoxic T cells which recognize and eliminate a virus-infective cell. Your virus-specific antibody level rise during the course of the infection, but the antibody plays only a limited role in recovery from an established infection for most viruses. Nonetheless, a specific antibody plays a very important role in preventing reinfection or once na-infect ka na, okay, nag-cure ka, then ma-infect kaliwat. So that is the prevention for reinfection of the host with some or with the same virus. The infection of the host with an effectivity of your immune response can eliminate most viruses from the body, and thus most viral infections are short-lived. However, there are certain viruses that are able to invade your immune response and establish a persistent infection in their host. The most famous example is your HIV or human immunovirus. But there are many others. Your viruses use a variety of strategies to invade the immune system on the whole, and these persistent infections are asymptomatic and only manifested clinically if the patient become immunocompromised. So you have human immuno uh, viruses. So this is your HIV. Then you have your virus and also cancer. And about 15% of the human cancer are caused by viruses. Certain persistent viruses survive in a host by transforming a cell that they infect, including the infective cells to proliferate or mag-multiply para sila. However, the virus infection is only the first step in the pathway to malignant, and only small percentage of infected persons actually get cancer. Common virus-induced cancers including your carcinoma of the cervix or your human papilloma virus, your liver cancer which is halin sa hepatitis B and hepatitis C, your Kaposi sarcoma from your herpes virus 8, and your Burkitt's lymphoma from your Epstein-Barr virus. Okay, the distinction of an inactive of your virus. So you have your heat. Most are inactivated at 56 degrees Celsius for 30 minutes or 100 degrees Celsius for a few seconds. Then you have your drying. This variable enveloped viruses are rapidly inactivated. Then you have your ultraviolet irradiation inactivates viruses. Organic solvents such as your chloroform, ether, and alcohol, okay, your enveloped nga viruses are inactivated. Those without are resistant. And then you have oxidizing and reducing agent. Viruses are inactivated by formaldehyde, chlorine, iodine, hydrogen peroxide. Then you have your phenols. Most viruses are resistant to your phenols. So have examples here of mga viruses. So, ang mga tsura sa itong viruses in a electron microscope. So here, from A to B, a virus with negative sense, a single-strand RNA. Okay, the influenza A virus. Then you have corona virus of type to be responsible with severe acute respiratory syndrome or your SARS. Then you have here, this is the virus that causes HIV. Okay, that causes your AIDS. Then you have your herpes virus here. Next one is virus. Okay, this is a virus of a bacteriophage T4 viruses that infects bacteria. So, ang maning virus nga attach sa bacteria. Then you have a double-stranded DNA mini virus. This is amoeba polymedia mini virus or APMV. Okay. Influenza, polio virus, you have your AIDS nga virus, herpes nga virus, and your rabies nga virus here. So you have here mga definition sa aton nga virology. So as you can see, wala ta naging padalong dito kay padip ang aton nga discussion sa virology because as food tech, okay, hindi mo gid man ma-encounter gawa ang virus sa food. Virus, okay, or particles of your virion are infectious agents composed of a nucleic acid, which is either RNA or DNA lang yun. Hindi pwede both. A protein shell, which is your capsid, and in some cases, a lipid envelope. Your virions are full of capacity to replicate when a susceptible target cell is encountered. Your capsid and your capsomers, okay, the protein coat that surrounds uh, the viral nucleic acid. This is composed of a repeating protein subunits called your capsomeres. Generally, capsids have their helical or isohedral symmetry. Then you have your nucleic capsid with a complete protein nucleic acid complex. Now you have your satellite or defective nga viruses. Okay, viruses which requires a second virus or your helper virus for replication. For example, you have your hepatitis D virus in the major human pathogen example. It requires the presence of hepatitis B danay to complete its replication cycle. Ibig sabihin, kung hindi ka infected sang Hepa B nga virus, kung ma-infect ka lang sang Hepa D, okay, the Hepa D has no methods to multiply or proliferate. Then you have your viroids. Viroids are the smallest known autonomously replicating molecule. They consist of a single-stranded or cellular RNA, and residue is a plant pathogen. Then you have your prions. Prions are not viruses but are often distinguished within the microbiology category. Your prions are infectious protein molecules that contains no definable nucleic acid and responsible for the transmissible of familiar spongiae form of your encephalopathies. Then you have your mga classifications. Kaya viral classification has been confused of changing over the years. In the past, viruses were often classified by a host, target organ, or vector, and these are still used vernacularly. You have your example, hepatitis virus. Your modern classification is based on the following three categories. So you have the type of a nucleic acid. It's either DNA or RNA, single-stranded or double-stranded, and its replication strategy. Then you have your capsid symmetry. It's either icosahedral or helical. You have here picture. Okay. Isosahedral or it's either helical lang ilang formation. Okay. Now you have pathogenesis or the viral disease. As of the infectious agents which causes your human disease, the outcome of the interaction of a particular virus with a human host is dependent on both pathogen and host factor. The viral strains within a genus may differ cell tropism, a replication capacity for cytopathogenic effects, and as an example of a strain of your HIV may preferentially target monocytes and your macrophage or T lymphocytes and may use different co-receptors like your chemotaxin receptors or CCR5 or CXCR4 on the cell surface and may replicate to different level and may include different degree of cell killing. These traits have different clinical correlated for your HIV infected persons with respect to the rates of your CD4 cells decline and progressions to clinical age. On the host side, the nature of the exposure and your host immunity status are probably the two most important determinant of your outcome. Thus, the key element of your virus-host interactions are the following. So you have your viral strain, your inoculum size, your route of exposure, your susceptibility of your host, if it's either pre-existing immunity from your past exposure or mga vaccination. Then you have immune status and your age of the host. Reason ko namin ni ang mga viral strain as for like sa aton sa buong pandemic you have your COVID. We have different strains sa aton nga COVID. The COVID exists already long before it infects human but subong lang gid ya nga naging naging siya airborne okay kag totally for human specific na. Okay? Aside pa da ang iya nga human specific nga strain, okay, nag-develop or nag-mutate pa into more dangerous pa nga strain. You have your Delta as the most dangerous nga strain there is. Okay? Then you have your inoculum size. Anong ginamit niya ng inoculum size? For example, if sa palibot, okay, if you are in a room, okay, if 10 person nga sa room, then 6 person are infected with the COVID, then 4 is wala. Ang ginamita na nga inoculum is the for example, ang ma-share nga virus sa amo na nga palibot. Therefore, the spread sang airborne or nga virus sa na room is greater than a room that has 10 people and only has one infected with a COVID. So that's the size on or inoculum size. Then you have your route of exposure. So the chances of being exposed sa atong nga airborne kung closed room kag sa open nga area. Then you also have the sharing sa utensils, una. Then you have the sustainability of the host if either may vaccine na ba siya or may pre-existing immunity. So, ano na nga daan. Then you have immune status. It's either sa ila nga bataon pa siya, wala pa siya sang antibody. It's either tigulang na siya kay para makaproduce pa sang antibody or makacope up. That is the immune status. Then you have the net result of these interactions may be no infection, abortive infection with limited viral replication. You have asymptomatic infection, symptomatic infection, depending upon the agent and the immune status of the host, and persistent or the latent of the self-limited infection. Then you have immune response to viral infection. You have your innate. Innate is a non-specific immunity, refers to those elements of the immune system that can clear virus or viral infected cells immediately upon shortly after viral exposure, which are not dependent upon your immunologic memory. Your non-specific may include your phagocytic cells, which is your neutrophils and monocyte kag macrophages. Then you have your cytokines, okay, they are interferons, and your chemokines. Then you have your natural killer cells, and they have poorly defined antiviral factor that may exist in your blood or body fluids. Then you have your adaptive. Adaptive is a specific immune response or antigen, which is specific B and T cells response that leads to the development of your antibodies. Then also you have your cytotoxic T cells and antibody depending on your cellular toxicity. So we'll be discussing sa ating immune response part 2 sa atong chapter 7. Okay, in some instances, an intense immunologic reaction to your viral agent can result in immunopathology and serious clinical syndromes. A prime example is dengue hemorrhagic fever, which is likely due to antibody-dependent enhancement and T-cell activation on re-exposure to dengue viruses. So that concludes aton nga study sa virology. So, in short lang with wala gid pa sang deep nga discussion regarding sa aton nga virus because as food technologists, okay, we will not be focusing sa aton nga virus. So, focus gid kamo sa bacteria, mga fungi, mga muna nga topic ag also sa mga microorganism nga hindi na makita sa aton nga naked eye. So, sa aton nga chapter 2, thank you. Alright, good day class. On our second part of chapter 7, so we have here your immunology. So, immunology is, okay, what is immunology? It is the origin for the study of how body protects itself from infectious diseases because of our microorganisms such as your mga bacteria, viruses, mga protozoa, mga parasite, kag fungi, and also mga parasitic organism such as your helmet worms. Ibig sabihin, we'll be focusing sa aton nga body reaction or sa aton nga immune system. So it is the study of our immune system. So it is important or initial barrier to infection or mga our physical such as your skin. So it is part of our immune system, immunology, mangyapon our immune system that enhance the substances excreted by the body such as your saliva, mga tears that contains your molecules that can neutralize your bacteria. And also mga internal mucosal tissues such as your lungs, airways, kag aton nga gut are coated with your mucus that is able to trap potential infectants or mga contaminants. In atong airways, your mobile ciliate hairs work together to transport contaminants away from vulnerable nga mga areas. Tissues, mga sa atong nga skin, and also mga mucosal surfaces and airways also contains population of your mga immune cells that responds to infectants that breach or mga gasulod sa aton nga physical defenses. It is most complex nga form to our immune system consists of your two branches. You have your innate immune system and your ang innate immune system that utilizes your mga hardware strategies to provide rapid general response when alerted by certain typical signal of infection, essential forming a first line of defense. And you have your adaptive nga immune system that is able to develop highly specific resistance or response and or ato nga persistent immune memory to a target infection with extraordinary accuracy. Both system works in close cooperation and into the important extent. The adaptive immune system relies on the innate immune system to alert the potential targets and shape its response to them. Sa ating mga immune tissues, you have all immune cells originate from your bone marrow, derived from a hematopoietic stem system, but an important set of your immune systems is your T lymphocytes that undergoes your maturation in an organ known as your thymus. The thymus and also your bone marrow are known as your primary lymphoid tissue. Ang imong secondary lymphoid tissue, namely your lymph nodes, such as your spleen, mga mucosa-associated lymph node tissue or your mouth, are important sites for generating adaptive immunity. Okay, and that contains your lymphocytes, your key adaptive cells. The lymphatic system is the system of a vessel draining fluid derived from the blood plasma from the body tissue. Your lymph node that houses your lymphocytes are positioned along with the draining lymph vessels and monitor uh, the lymph for the sign of infection. Your multi-class, okay, ang mucosa-associated lymphoid tissue, okay, are important in mucosal immune responses and reflect the particular importance aton sa of the gut and airways in immune defense. Ang spleen is very essential in serve as the lymph node for your blood. Okay, ang aton nga innate, okay, mas specific nga definition sa aton innate, kay aton nga mast cell are your mga basophils, they are white blood or mga lymphocytes. They are innate cell types that are active secretes histamine, which can be an important inflammatory mediator produced in response to initial tissue damage as a result of infection. Your mast cell are tissue resident. An example, in your mucosa tissue, your basophils are found in the blood. In particular, they play a key role in so-called your allergic response. Your innate immunity comprises both cellular and humoral element. Ang humoral is in solution. The cellular elements are represented notably by your phagocytes. Okay, the phagocytes, mga white blood cells, specifically your neutrophils and your macrophages that can respond to signs of infections. For example, you have your inflammation in this tissue and home in on infective bacteria before neutralizing and engulfing them. Ang ibig sabihin ng engulf is ginakaon sila. That's what you call your phagocytosis. Recognized in a microorganisms by an innate system occurs very characteristic pathogen association, molecular patterns or your palm on microbial surfaces, and an important family of innate receptors called your pattern recognition receptors or your PRRs are responsible for this, notably including your toll-like receptors or TLR, the natural killer or your NK cells, other important innate cells that is able to detect and target intracellular infections of your body cells by viruses, a further specialized innate cells in your eosinophils that plays a particular role in targeting your larger infective organism such as your parasitics nga mga worm. The complement system represents your homular arm of your innate immunity and consists of a number of your proteins found in the solutions of your blood that can be interact directly or indirectly with infective nga bacteria through the different activation pathways ng imong inflammation sa aton nga body as a result of an infection, allowing plasma containing a complement protein to enter or infected tissues. Once activated, the membrane protein assemble to form complexes on the surface of your microbes that punches holes in its membrane. The complement activation pathway are term the classical pathway, alternate pathway, kag manus binding lectin pathway. So, mas more gini siya sa amon gid again sa college kami since this is more sa diagnostic before healthcare nga mga courses. So, your adaptive, hindi na po naman. Okay, your adaptive immunity, okay, is the key for the adaptive immunity response is your lymphocytes. Okay, these are several subtypes. However, this falls under the two broad designation of your lymphocytes, your T lymphocyte and your B lymphocyte, known as your T cells and B cells. Although both originate in the bone marrow, your T matures in your thymus, that's why it is T lymphocyte, while your B cells mature in your bone marrow. Okay, during your organism alternatively develop a large number of your B and T cells are produced, each of which has the ability to recognize a specific and essential unique molecular target. An important aspect of this maturation process is that for both these cell types, cells are recognized target within your body or atong nga self tissue and identified to weed out and addition aspect of your maturation process of your T cells in a further distinct subsets of your are produced as what you call your helper T cells, also called as CD4 plus T cells. And your cytotoxic T cells are called your CD8 plus T cells. The individual specificity of your lymphocyte is the key for the generation of that adaptive response. The adaptive immunity utilizes many kinds of your receptors to coordinate its activity. In cells carries your T cell receptors or your TCR, whilst your B cells carries your B cell receptor or BCR, and various fine structures of these receptors account for individual specificity described above. In addition, another set of receptors encoded with the major histocompatibility complex or your MHC plays an important role in adaptive immunity. Your MHC class 1 receptors are displayed in a majority of your blood cells, while your MCH class 2 receptors are restricted to antigen presenting cells or your APC. Both these receptors type interact with your TCRs. So, anong main point sa ating adaptive immunity? Adaptive immunity is a more specific, okay? More specific nga response to a certain invasive nga pag-invade sa microorganisms such as your bacteria, virus, mauna. Kung sa diin, mas need nila more power or para more phagocytic activation para mapatay ang microorganism. That's why your adaptive immunity is important than your innate. Okay? Although ang imong innate, it's the first leg. So kung hindi na kung kaya, your adaptive comes in. Ang natod nga, summary sa itong adaptive. Hindi tayo napagpadalaman because this is for pang health kag diagnostic. Okay, so mga terms kamo di mga TH7. So if you want to truly understand ang atong nga innate, okay, you have here. So you have mga dendritic cells. Okay, so skip na lang para hindi ka mo ma-overload. Then you have your cellular adaptive response. Your body cells are consciously responding to your protein derived for your intercellular environment and presenting in association with your MHC class 1 receptors. This will typically be self-antigen that is ignored by your immune system but can also be peptide derived from a infecting virus or your bacteria or aberrant cancer peptide. Your active cytotoxic T cells are given specific fluorination in your limb and then migrate to the site of your infection where they are monitoring your body cells for a sign of intracellular infection or a aberrant self-protein associated with your cancer. Present on your MHC class 1 molecules using your TCRs if they encounter antigen that they recognize. This indicates the inflammation or malignancy, and then they are able to induce apoptosis or auto-destruction kung sa diin ginaguba nila ang body cell. This circulates in a circular adaptive response. For your humoral adaptive response, as already stated sa itong B cells are recognized antigen through direct recognition of their antigen via BCRs without the need of a prior processing of your presentations ng via receptors. So they are the key identifying of extracellular pathogen. For example, you have your bacteria in your limb. Once activated, your B cell differentiates into plasma cells and they that are capable for secreting antibody molecules into the circulation. Okay, ano ni sa aton nga ginapagawa you have your small molecules that match the individual specificity of the parent cells that are then able to find their target somewhere elsewhere in the body. And once bound sa atong target, your antibody molecules can activate its classic pathway of the complement system, therefore directing it to neutralize its target with great specificity, and also binding of the antibody also enhances your phagocytosis. So yung aton nga immune memory. Okay, the immune memory is very important sa aton because it is the effective primary adaptive response. You have here example you relating to a pathogen that hasn't previously been encountered takes some time to develop. Since only small numbers of the target specific B and T cells are present initially and once activated, they must first proliferate or magpadamo through a process known as your clonal selection to form effector cells. A portion of these effector cells go on to form a stack of a long-lived memory cells, ensuring that if a particular pathogen is encountered again, kung maliwat bigla ma-infect ka, liwat. So you have here, example na lang is aton nga chickenpox, di ba? Once ma-infect ka, di ba, sa chickenpox, okay, your body will form a response to your chickenpox. Once you are being or cured ka na sa chickenpox, you will form your antibodies for chickenpox. That's why it is hard for you to get infected with a chickenpox liwat. Ang mga sa kape na sa mga bata that is wala pa antibodies sa chickenpox, napalayo gid sila sa mga ill or ongoing pa ang chickenpox para hindi sila ma-infect. Pero sa mga adults na or nakaagi ng chickenpox, so they have higher immunity to the microorganism. So a particular of these effector cells go on and pathogen again, and many subsequent secondary adaptive response such as your memory response develops more quickly and thus more effective. So let us proceed sa aton nga cytokines and chemokines. Your cytokines forms an important family of your protein that functions as the immune mediator and have important roles during your immune response. They can serve both stimulate and inhibit differentiation, proliferation, or activity of your immune cells. A subset of your cytokines, your chemokines, plays an important role in guiding your immune system to the site of infections by forming your chemical trails. So this is one the hatag sang direction or guidance sa mga mga phagocytes. Ato nga immune dysfunction. Immune dysfunction is important for pathologies may result to your immune dysfunction or mga inborn congenital immunodeficiencies with a genetic basis and can disable all or parts ato ng immune response, both innate adaptive, resulting in a vulnerability to infections or mga cancers. Example including your severe combined immunodeficiency or your mga SIDS and common variability immunodeficiency, your CVID. Okay. In addition, your autoimmunity occurs when an immune system mistakenly targets self-tissue, resulting in a chronic inflammatory condition and tissue destruction. For example, you have your type 1 diabetes, rheumatoid arthritis, and multiple sclerosis. Sa ating transplantation science, identification and an important role for MHC is allowing the body to discriminate between yourself and also non-self tissues, have greatly enhanced the success of tissue and organ transplantation by allowing tissue matching. This is aided by the developing of our immunosuppressive drugs that are becoming increasingly sophisticated as we identify more specific elements within our immune system to target. And vaccines you have here, importantly subong because of our COVID pandemic. Vaccines can utilize harmless elements from a particular pathogen to prime the immune system so that if the pathogen is actually encountered or it's met with a stronger secondary memory, respond and dealt more quickly. That's why sa mga wala pa kaagi COVID, that's why it is very important for them to have vaccinated para mabutangan na sila sang though same type sang COVID but not activated. Therefore, your body will produce antibody response for the COVID, okay, without getting sick. Okay, you will also have encounter mga side effects. Okay, but it is part of your body mechanism to promptly deal with the foreign object nga bago na-encounter sa imong body, sa imong lawas. You have here mga vaccinations ang mga smallpox, polio, tuberculosis, your measles, mumps, rubella, your papilloma virus, amongst many others. However, success can depend on the target pathogens. And effective vaccines for your HIV, hepatitis C, and also malaria remains inclusive, in a large part due to mutability of these organisms as target for immune system. Then you have your antibody interaction. So you have your antibody interactions or antigen antibody reaction. It is a specific chemical interaction between your antibodies produced by your B cells ng alin sa bone marrow and your white blood cells and mga antigens during your immune reaction. The antigens of your antibody combines by the process called your agglutination. It is the fundamental reaction of the body by which the body is protected from a complex of foreign molecules such as your mga pathogens and their chemical toxins. In the blood, the antigens are specifically with a high affinity bond with your antibody to form your antigen-antibody complexes. The immune complex is transported to a cellular system where it can be destroyed or deactivated. You have here definition sa aton nga antigen. Okay? The antigen in many substances that causes your immune system to produce your antibody against it. This means that your immune system does not recognize the substance and is trying to fight it off. An antigen may be substance from the environment such as mga chemicals, your bacteria, ng virus or pollen o mga pollen or mga foreign organism gasulod that is not normal to your body. Then you have your antibody. Your antibodies, called your immunoglobulins, are protective proteins produced by immune system in response to presence of a foreign substance called your antigen. Meaning the counterpart sa antigen. Antibodies recognize and latch onto your antigens in order to remove them from your body. A wide range of your substances are regarded by your body as antigen, including your disease-causing organisms and toxic materials such as your insect venom. Then you have your agglutination. Agglutination is defined as a form of clumps of cell or inert particles by a specific antibodies to surface antigenic components and direct agglutination or antigenic components absorbed or chemically coupled to red cells and inert particles, which is your mga passive hemagglutination and passive agglutination respectively. So you have here an example of a blood typing kung saan din mapakita ang agglutination or clumping ng cells. So you have here how to know if you have a blood type AB. Okay? Because you have an anti-A kag anti-B nga chemicals. Okay? Kung butang mo na sa sang drops ng blood, if you are a type A nga blood, you will see agglutination or clumping sa red blood cell sa amo na nga reagent. So you have here nag-clump siya sa A kag nag-clump siya sa B. So this is a type AB nga dugo. Then you have here a type A kay sa type A lang siya nag-clump and sa type B there is no reaction. Then you have a type B because sa type A wala, nag-mix lang ang dugo. Then sa anti-B siya nga agglutinate. Then you have a type O, which is common sa mga Filipino, no agglutination in both A and B. So you have here a illustration kung paano nag-agglutinate. So you have your mga antigen, which is, for example, is a chimeric Escherichia coli. Okay? Then you have your antibodies. So, ginapatapik sa mga antibodies is gatapik siya sa mga foreign object. Then, we'll start its phagocytosis. So, this concludes our part 2 sa aton nga chapter 7, which is your immunology or study sa aton nga immune system. So, that will be all. And thank you.